We are now joined by Hilde NORDBø, Director and Head of Sustainability, Handelsbanken, Norway. Well, hello, Hilde. Wonderful to have you here today. You've come all the way from Norway, right?
Yes, I have. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Well, it's great to have you here today. And how much of your work is divided between Sweden and Norway normally?
Well, usually I have the kind of best of both worlds, because my colleague here in Sweden, they take care of all the reporting requirements and the regulation that we need to follow up on. And my work in Norway would then be more commercial and towards the customers. So I'm mostly based in Oslo, but we have regular meetings with our colleagues here online or face-to-face. So it's best of both worlds, I would say.
Now, you have a long career within banking, but how did you come to work on sustainability in particular? Was it the biggest change? What is the biggest change that you've seen in the past 10 years?
I think that what we've seen is that we've moved from a place where everybody signed all of these different initiatives because they had maybe good intentions and wanted to kind of do something more. What we see now is that everything is moving from kind of this signing papers to actually reporting, and the reporting requirements are really taking a heavy load on all the banks, which is, I think, the biggest change. So the challenge will now be from working on the risk aspect and then also being able to take advantage of all the opportunities as well. And in your work at the bank, there is also a reason for looking into new types of issues, and many beyond climate change and nature. Yeah.
What is it you see being on the rise and should be on our future radar?
I think that, as you said, when it comes to the climate issues, there's been so many kind of obvious examples and consequences, both financial and human, in the past year only. So I think that hopefully we will solve that big issue, even though it's really complex. So I think that looking ahead, I think the macroeconomic issues will definitely, as we just see now, will absolutely be a really important part. And with the social aspects and human rights issues, I think it's definitely on the rise, and the kind of companies' responsibilities in light of this. And of course also things that has to do with technology and artificial intelligence and digitalization as well. So it's kind of two very different but also very kind of obvious topics that I think we will need also to integrate into the sustainability agenda.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll move us over to our fireside chat.
Thank you.
Okay, Hilde, welcome back. How do you think your role of CSO has developed over the years?
That's a very good question. I think that many of us here will probably have very different answers. But I think that, as I also touched upon in the beginning, I think it has a lot to do with we were a lot of people very kind of engaged in the topic, and some of us just wanted kind of to do more good, so to say, but also realize that doing good and also being profitable at the same time is something that you need to merge. And I think depending on where you came from, some came from HR, some came from communications and other places, but I think that with all the good intentions, I think that the role now is really, as I touched upon, has to do with regulation. And at least from I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, so I cannot solve kind of all the regulatory issues. So I think that the biggest change now, what we need to manage, is actually pulling all these different strings together and working together with the economics function, the risk environment, and communication, of course, and HR. So I think that it's still about connecting all the dots, but at the same time then figuring out what will kind of our role be as the sustainability people, so to say. And I think that will differ between companies, because if you're a more kind of industry company compared to a bank or retail, etc., I think that you will need very different skills being a sustainability person, so to say. So I think that it's not one answer to that, but at least I think many of us will probably maybe say this is what we said many years ago, because there's been so much work that we have been talking about for many years. and that has been written down in all this, as I said, these initiatives, and that is now actually being implemented into law and regulation all over the world. So it's a really exciting time, but it's also challenging because there's so many people now that has to work on sustainability issues. So
major multitasking.
Definitely, it's a lot of multitasking.
What has been the role of regulation in that development?
It's been very, very important, of course, because taking sustainability, and when I say that, I mean the company's most material ESG issues, and taking that and getting it into some form of different regulation. And also the banking industry has kind of been also in the forefront here, where from the EU perspective and their EU Sustainable Finance plan have pointed to the financial sector, which also means that we have gotten a really heavy burden when it comes to regulation that we have to implement and work on moving along. So I think it has been a really important driver, and also has made the attention around the sustainability issues has also moved to more places in the organization. But I think also it's still important then that we manage to kind of pinpoint and prioritize kind of what are the tasks related to regulation that we need to solve, and then what is then left kind of to build upon when it comes to commercialization and competitive advantage, because we will need to separate them, because at least within finance now, there's a lot of things we all have to do, and we have to kind of deliver on. So that kind of talking about who is most sustainable maybe doesn't make that much sense anymore, because we have so much to do when it comes to the regulatory requirements. So that what will be the competitive advantage would actually be interesting to see, because we will all have green loans, sustainability-linked loans, and all these different products will be the same, because that's what the regulatory development is about. So finding the kind of niche for the different banks, for instance, I think we will see a development moving ahead.
Do you think that there is kind of a one-size-fits-all when it comes to tasks and responsibilities as CSO?
No, definitely not. I think that, and again, it's also been, I think that's also one of the questions that I ask in this session, if the role of the CSO, will it be redundant moving ahead, as you have the CFO will be responsible for all the reporting requirements, you have the risk environment, taking care of climate risk and other ESG types of risk. You will probably have a strategy office or a strategy department that will work on strategy, integrating the material ESG issues. So I think that the role of the CSO will again really differ between different types of companies. And I'm not sure if maybe all companies will have one, depending on how they develop and divide, let's say, the responsibility of the different material ESG issues, so to say.
Now, I know that you've mentioned AI, and AI is really responsible for being such a hot topic currently. Any thoughts on how AI will affect work within sustainability in the next 2 to 5 years?
That's also it's a good question, and also a very big question. And I think I often compare it to when we talked about innovation or digitalization some years ago. I mean, it's a huge area that will affect anything, and there's no way around it. And the way that at least I look upon it and how we work on this topic is that I see at least 2 areas that are kind of the most prominent at the moment. And the first one is, of course, data that we're all talking about when we talk about ESG. And I think that AI will help us with data access, data efficiency, and data quality and traceability. And that it will help with that. But at the same time, the AI and the machine learning, they are dependent on getting real data in and good data in. So as long as we don't have access to that really good data, it doesn't really matter what the machine then or the artificial intelligence kind of technology puts out if what we put in is not good enough. So let's say we have a transition plan that we get to develop, and it looks really good when it comes out, but what we have put in is not good data. It doesn't really matter. So I think the kind of human aspects is still really, really important, and we need to understand more the data that we have access to, and then we can start to use the machine learning and artificial intelligence. And the second part of it is about responsibility, which also I think it's a really interesting area, responsible AI. And I think also what we've seen in that space is that it has kind of taken the same development as sustainability did for a very long time, where you had kind of, first you're very engaged in the topic, and then you see that there are some dilemmas and there are some challenges, and then people start searching for regulation and someone to kind of put the things together. And when it comes to AI, we have already seen a lot of good development, I think, that was needed when it comes to regulating the artificial intelligence. So the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, for instance. So that you have to make the companies responsible themselves and accountable, so to say, for the AI technology that they are using, because as probably you also know that people are talking about the robots will take over the humans and we will kind of destroy ourselves through AI, and it's there is no personality in the AI, of course. So everything that they do
Not yet.
is something that we have taught them or told them or programmed them to do. So which is why I think that the accountability aspect is so important, but also the traceability of the AI and the open data as well. And so it's actually kind of comparable to where we were with sustainability for some time ago as well. But
Let's talk about business integration in practice. So what are the most important internal stakeholders?
For us in the bank, it is the finance, of course, and the finance department, and also corporate governance is at least someone that I have been working very closely with during my career in order to make sustainability concrete and really integrating it into the business model and making sure that you follow up on the kind of right KPIs, you connect it with the governance model in general and not kind of make something on the side. So I think that is at least a very good place to start, and also looking to regulation again. When you have to do this materiality analysis, we also need more people on board understanding what the topics that comes out of it, how you're handling them. You need also to integrate that into the business model. So they are, of course, very important stakeholders. But another aspect that at least from my experience, the customer aspects and the product development. I mean, if we talk about sustainability on a very general level, and it's all about regulation or reporting and CSRD and all these abbreviations, and we're not able to kind of get it out to the customer, then it's just things on the paper, basically. So I think also the customer aspect and the innovation as well are really important stakeholders internally that we also need to, at least that I've experienced, has been so much fun working more on the customer side when we talk about sustainability.
So what is the role of the sustainability department when all units need to incorporate ESG to some extent?
Yeah, I think that also depends on the type of organization again. But I think that, at least again, from my experience, is that, for instance, the stakeholder management issues, that is also very important. Identifying the different stakeholders, being NGOs, customer groups, governmental bodies, and all types of different stakeholders. I think that is one job that it's not natural for anybody else in the organization to handle. And also, again, pulling all the strings together and making sure that you have this overview of all the important ESG issues and that they are handled and addressed at the kind of right places, if there is such thing. And again, also making sure that you take into consideration your most important stakeholders. But I think it really depends on what type of organization you are, because I think that, again, if you work in an industry, let's say you produce steel or aluminium, I mean that the sustainability department would probably or maybe would be expected to be more subject matter experts compared to someone working in a bank, for instance, because we need to address customers in so many types of industries, so to say.
Yeah. And last week, Unilever CEO Schumacher said that they will downplay their sustainability goals to be less aspirational and more tangible. Is that good news or bad news with regards to sustainability work?
I think it's wonderful. I think it's really, really wonderful because, as I also said in the beginning, I mean, there's been so many aspirational goals and, thick sustainability reports about where you want to be, hope to be, try to be. So I think that taking it again really, really down is also something that the investors really, really needs to see and wants to see. So I think he probably says that, I think, to the investors, so to say, because I think it was also said during an investor call. And I think it's good news for sustainability work in a whole, because if you have all these aspirational goals, very long in the long-term perspective, and you're not able to deliver on the more short-term concrete goals, it's not going to take us anywhere. So I think it's, and they have been kind of also portrayed and lifted up many places as a kind of front runner. So I think that if this is a way of showing that we will see maybe less aspirational goals and more concrete short-term KPIs, I think that's a good thing, because hopefully then also companies will be held accountable, and maybe we will see more progress within the field, even if it's come to reduced emissions or investments in new technology, etc. So I think it's definitely good news.
Fantastic. But another question, is there a risk that all the reporting requirements can turn sustainability into a paper exercise? And if that's the case, then how do we avoid that?
I think that for the small and medium-sized companies, that has been kind of their biggest concern, at least from our perspective, what we hear from them, even though they're not kind of hit by the regulatory requirements yet. And I'm not that concerned about it on the one hand, because if it means that companies are spending more time on reporting and being accountable and traceable on their most material ESG issues, I think then it's actually a good thing if this kind of paper exercise leads to them actually doing something on their most important issues. But of course, if it's just about writing the policies or writing the report and it's just put away somewhere, then of course it's not a good thing. But I think that given that the investors now and the markets are really demanding the reports, and these transparency issues are also kind of high on the agenda, and again all the things we see happening in the world, especially connected to climate, I think that not reporting on this and being transparent is not an issue either. So I would be more concerned if we saw more the aspirational thing rather than kind of the paperwork, so to say, as long as it's material issues they're reporting on.
Financial Times just wrote, amongst other articles, that ESG is not dead. It's just growing up. So do you think that there is some truth to that also in relation to the debates going on in the US?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure how many have followed all those articles, but I think it's been for some time it was a kind of weekly follow-up on ESG is dead and it's not useful and it's just a scam and all these different aspects. But I think that the Financial Times point about that it's growing up, I think also has to do with something I mentioned earlier, that it has been, let's say, playful, wanting to do good, a happy face, running around maybe every here and there. And you have seen a lot of different standards for reporting. And now it's kind of all coming together. And you see that we've talked about the GRI and the SASB, integrated reporting framework. So I think that's, I like that analogy, that it's growing up, because it means that it's becoming, let's say, more mature, more connected to the, not necessarily real world, but it's getting more connected to the core of the companies, and also more focused in a way, I think.
Absolutely. And one final question to wrap everything up. Will there still be use for the Chief Sustainability Officer when ESG is totally integrated?
Well, I hope so for my own sake, but I would say yes, as long as you manage to kind of be the one that can pull the strings together and you're able to kind of see a little bit further ahead and then pick up on those topics that are not already integrated. So let's say working only on climate change within sustainability right now, I think that that is a missed opportunity for the CSO, because there are so many issues that lies ahead that we need to handle and integrate into the business models, that I think the CSO will be a very good person or area to handle, so to say.
Thank you so much, Hilde. It's been wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.